Now let's look at this administrative freedom. Very interesting. He says administrative freedom or administrative control must be given to somebody else, to Lokpal in this case. Sir, I hope nobody in this country considers that CEC, CAG are Sarkari bodies. I hope somebody will concede that much, although I am not sure. In an appropriate moment, we will also be told, perhaps by the BJP or by those outside, that even CAG and CEC are Sarkari bodies. They are totally independent in action and in concept in the constitution. Does the CEC have an administrative control somewhere? Or does the CBC say, today I want to pay my deputy CEC the salary of a cabinet secretary? Because I am independent, I will pay him cabinet secretary salary. Who is the controlling cadre authority of the CEC? The law ministry. Who is the controlling cadre authority of the CAG? The Ministry of Finance. Who is the controlling authority, administrative authority of the UPSC? The DOPT. Now, do you want to create a body? This is common for everybody. That doesn't mean that every day they sit on their head and they say you can't discharge your constitutional functions. Just because it is us, just because you want to earn a few brownie points outside, or just because of some state elections, you want to fundamentally alter the structure of this country, that administrative authority will not lie anywhere. Now, this is very important. Why does administrative authority lie with law ministry, finance ministry or DOPT? It lies because when the minister gets up in the house and seeks sanction for funds on the Consolidated Fund of India, he seeks sanction for funds on the Consolidated Fund of India for the CAG. The finance minister does that. The law minister does it for CEC. He is the political executive answerable to Parliament.
He replies.
In a democracy, he replies to questions. Today, for any of these authorities, do the civil service rules apply or not? Does a CAG officer, is it subject to the civil service disciplinary rules? Obviously he is. Is he, when he wants to travel abroad? Let's take a better example, my friend, the leader of the opposition, more familiar with, the Supreme Court. I hope you have remembered just about 6 months ago, if I remember, an additional secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs rejected the travel plans of 3 Supreme Court judges. He wrote on the file, according to me, this conference is not necessary to be attended by these 3 judges of the Supreme Court. Because the administrative ministry for travel abroad, for all other people also, is the MEA. If the CAG wants to travel abroad, he has to bring it within his budget and he has to seek 2 clearances. A political clearance necessary, whether somebody can go and represent somebody abroad. An administrative clearance is necessary, and he can't decide to do what he likes with the money. Now, do you want a system where administrative control is not vested in a member of the minister who gets up here and answers questions? Do you want administrative control in a minister who does not get up and seek Consolidated Fund of India funding? Are we talking of anarchy just because it suits you? I would implore my friend that we are together on this. In a short period, in a short-term expediency concept, please don't destroy institutions. There is a method in the madness what we have in India. There's a huge method. That method in the madness does not exist in our neighboring countries. But we should be proud and not destroy it merely because of the expediency of one particular bill. These are systems which have endured the test of time, and I can give you several examples. I can give you the examples. For example, if the Chief Election Commissioner of India wants to have an MOU with the Chief Election Commissioner of Pakistan, even for a very salutary and desirable object, he is not a law unto himself. We have several senior bureaucrats in this house today now, ex-bureaucrats. He has to go and seek permission from somewhere, whether it is the Ministry of External Affairs, or, because you cannot do things without an anchor. Incidentally, if you have checked up, you should know that the CBI, for almost everybody except from joint director and above, also selects and transfers on its own. Only some of the senior ones require consent, and that too it is, I believe, sir, with great respect, that it is highly exaggerated that in every case ministries are interfering with our institutions. Yes, we have had a record over the last 20 years that in some cases, and certainly as much in your side as much as our side, CBI may have been interfered with. But this is a highly exaggerated notion that Mr. Narayan Swamy's ministry or the minister is sitting in the CBI office every day and monitoring the investigation. Today's age with media, 24/7 entering our rooms, our bedrooms, do you think it's possible? Do you want to destroy institutions on theoretical, tilting at windmills, imaginary apprehensions? Let's turn, Mr. Chairman, sir, with your permission, to a very important issue of 253. With great respect, I'd like to submit that I would have thought this issue would not arise. Perhaps the issue has been raised only because my friend wants to play Narad Muni. He believes he must play Narad Muni to the galleries because some of our friends on our side will get provoked by him because he talks of federalism. Now I'm going to tell you something very interesting. The night before last, I went to the Constituent Assembly debates. And I'm going to prove to you in a minute that perhaps my friends in the BJP and the leader of the opposition are telling us that they are wiser than our founding fathers. Because our founding fathers discussed that state autonomy is very important. But then they created not one, not two, not three, not four, but 6 inroads into it, right from Article 249 to 253. They said for national interest, for higher national interest, you have to have provisions where affirmatively Parliament is given power to have an inroad where Parliament is given power by our Constitution. And my friend is telling you that there is an assault on federalism. One of our lawyer colleagues there wrote an article 2 days ago, used the word assault on federalism. When I tell you what happened in the Constituent Assembly debates, you will realize that 253 itself was as it is put there. And then, I'll give you the names, a joint memorandum was moved, saying at least make it clear that you shall only do it if it is obligatory upon international treaty to do it. And Mr. B.N. Rao, the constitutional advisor, got up and said, no change in 253. It will remain as it is. It's important for Indian Federation. It's important for national interest. So 253 is a constitutionally decided national interest provision. How can it be an assault on federalism? The two are contradictory. And just to give you the details in 2 minutes, yes, list 2 is inviolate. I'll come to the argument about entry 41. With great respect to my learned friend, I really admire his legal knowledge. That's a wrong argument. But that apart, list 2 is important. Federalism is important. But just consider that the articles which start from 249, forget 253 for a minute. 249 says, Parliament can legislate on the state list, list 2, in the national interest. 250 says, Parliament can legislate on the state list in emergency. There is no absolute federalism. There is no absolute virtue. Number 3, 251 says, parliamentary law will prevail if legislated under 249 or 250, if it is repugnant to state law. 252 is a different provision where consent of 2 states is required, and I'm surprised that the BJP continues to insist on this again and again. Yes. Even after my friend Mr. Sibbal clarified it in the other house, 252 specifically says it applies where Parliament has no jurisdiction. 252 requires resolution of 2 states because 252 says that it is in cases where Parliament has no jurisdiction. May I read it if you have forgotten it? If it appears to the legislatures of 2 or more states to be desirable that any of the matters with respect to which Parliament has no power to make laws, and Mr. Sibbal said so. Now just read the opposite in 253. 253 says that we, the Constitution, are saying that Parliament, you shall have power. Let me read 253 for you in case you've forgotten that also. And it's very interesting. 253 says, notwithstanding any other clause in this whole chapter. 253 is supreme. It is above 252. Says, notwithstanding anything in the foregoing provisions of this chapter, Parliament has power to make any law for the whole or any part of the territory of India. And you are applying this to say it is anti-federal and it is no power and list 2. Let me remind you through the Honorable Chairman that when this happened, that when this bill came, this Article 253 It's very interesting. It's also educative and enlightening if you care to go to the debates. Article 253, and this is meant less for my friend, it is meant more for my friends this side, that we are doing no assault on federalism. And let me also clarify. 1 minute. Let me clarify.
Just
1 minute.
You are justifying the assault.
How can there be an assault, Mr. Leader of the Opposition, when the Constitution says Parliament shall have power? You are assaulting the Constitution then. Now, let me point out to you. Let me, Mr. Punj, please. This is not a TV channel. This is not a TV channel. It's serious stuff. It's serious stuff here. Now, let me come back to the debates. Now, in debates, this article 253 was called 230. At that time, the article was 230. By the way, I must preface my remarks by saying that this issue should not arise today because the government has bent over backwards and has already amended the law. The law before you today stands amended. It says it shall apply only with the consent of the states. Yeah.
Does 253 empower the government to give such an option to the states?
Of course it does. Let me, 1 minute, let me answer.
You are saying of course doesn't matter.
Question, let
Please
me
read
answer
it. Where does it give you?
Permit me to answer it, sir. Permit me
It's
to
an
answer it.
ultra-virus option.
Permit me to answer it. 253 says Parliament shall have power to make a law in implementation of a treaty. Remember 3 things which are forgotten about 253, not yet mentioned. 1, it is non-obstant. It overrides all other provisions. It says notwithstanding. 2nd, it says Parliament shall have power. I am not saying it, Constitution says so. 3rd is very interesting. It says to implement a treaty, but even to implement a decision taken at an international conference. So look at the national interest. When India goes abroad and commits itself in an international conference, even that is under 253. Now, if Parliament has power, that means Parliament can pass law. If Parliament can pass law, it has to be law under list 1 or list 3. This much you will accept. If Parliament can pass law, if it has the power to pass law, then why can't Parliament put clause 1(4) which we have put, that this law shall apply provided the state consents? Why not? Do you require a constitutional provision? Do you require a constitutional provision? Do you require a constitutional provision? Now, I want to ask this.
Are you realizing that?
Can
Sir, are you realizing, since you said it's serious stuff,
We are
the
talking
consequence of your argument is Parliament has the power to make law.
Yes.
It is non-obstantive, it is overriding,
Yes.
and Parliament has the power to make a law saying states may not listen to me and have their own stuff.
No, Parliament, you forget one important point. Mr. Jaitley, you forget. 1 minute. How can you forget that this power is available only when we have an international treaty? It is available only when you have international treaty. Only when you pass the National Human Rights Commission Act, it was under a treaty to have a National Human Rights Commission. The same act said NHRC and SHRC in the same act. It was under 253. National Human Rights Commission Act was under 253.
please.
Otherwise,
please.
how? Otherwise, how?
It's not.
Sir,
It's not your turn.
sir,
Please. Please let him.
Sir, let me
Let him
explain.
continue.
My time is limited, let me explain. Please tell us, I would like an answer. Now we are talking, now we are being technical. How is it that human rights, which involves law, order, everything which is a state subject, how is it that the National Act provides for state human rights acts? Yes. It provides because we had a treaty. We had a treaty commitment. And that was enacted in the NHRC Act. And if you read the NHRC Act, the first part says NHRC, the second part says each state shall have a state human rights commission, exactly as this chapter says.